This video is for assignment 6 in CAD graphics, the object called the jig. You will create, just as shown on the handout, the 3 views of this object drawn in third angle projection. You'll also go ahead and add the symmetry lines and the dimensions. For the dimensions, refer to the videos on how to set up a dimension style and place dimensions accurately. You may also want to refer to the video that will show you how to edit areas like this through your properties. When I come over to my CAD file, you'll see that I have the 3 views already drawn with the addition of this line right here. This is called a miter line, and we'll use it to project features from the right side view to the top and back and forth. This will help us be very accurate with our geometry. This works because the line itself is at a 45-degree angle and because the views are spaced exactly 2 inches apart. So this is what your drawing should look like when it's completed. I'm going to erase the views now and start from scratch. I'm starting on the object layer. I'm going to start with a command called ray. And that start coordinate is pointing to this lower left-hand point on the front view. The coordinates are 1.29, 1.60. So I'll enter that on my command line. With the ray command, I can create lines starting from a specific point and then continuing in whatever direction I chose, almost infinitely. So I'm going to create one for our horizontal edge and then one for the vertical edge and escape. I'm going to create the outlines of these 3 views using the offset command. If I take a look again at my dimensions, I'll see that I have an overall height of these views of 1.50, 2-inch spacing between, and then a height here of 2.30. So I'll start with those. O for offset. 1.50 is my first distance. Select this line. When I move my cursor in either direction, you'll see I get a preview of what that will look like. I want to click in the direction I want that copy to go. Offset again, this time a distance of 2 for the space between views. I'm hitting the space bar to continue that command again. This time offset of 2.3. Now I need to go in the other direction. So I'll look at my handout again. This distance, 4.12 inches, 2 inches between, and then I've got to go to my top view to get the width of this view, 2.30. Offset, 4.12 is my first distance. Offset, 2 inches between. Offset, 2.3. Now I have the outlines of each of the views. I'm going to use the trim command now to clean up some of these lines. I'm going to press enter past the step of choosing cutting edges and instead this time use the option for fence. With that option I can draw lines by clicking on points through places that I'd like to trim. And you'll see those lines that I've crossed get grayed out to give me a preview of what that will look like. When I'm finished, I press enter, and now I've cleaned up a lot of the extra lines. I've kept the horizontal and the vertical edge to continue filling in some of the details with that offset command. Before I do that though, I'm going to switch to a construction layer and fill in that miter line. That miter line again needs to be 45 degrees. It also starts at the outermost corners where the edges of that front or primary view would meet. L for line. Start at that point, track in 45 degrees. I'm going to go a bit beyond the views just to make sure I have enough space. And because this won't be part of any view of my object, I'm going to erase it. Now I can return to the offset command and fill in some more details. If I start with the horizontal edge, one edge that I can fill in is this edge right here with this dimension, 0.76. Offset, 0.76. Select that edge, click in the direction. I'm going to offset that vertical line. I'm going to start with this position here, 0.26. Then I can also include this, the 0.94. Offset, 0.26. Offset again, 0.94. I need to go back to that outermost edge. There. And I'm going to finish cleaning up all those lines between the views. I can also do some cleaning inside the views. That's good. Now I'm going to focus on the top view. Offset. I'm looking at these notches right here that have a distance of 0.40, and I know that they're the same because of this symmetry line. This line tells me that this bottom half is equal to the top, and that will help me fill in some of the details that I can then mirror to the other side using the mirror command. So offset 0.4, select that edge, offset. I'm going to trim out those lines now. I'm choosing cutting edges this time because I want to be very careful about how long these segments are cut. Okay, now if I take a look, I've got two angled edges in this view, and I've got two linear dimensions that govern the geometry of those lines as opposed to a linear dimension and an angle. We'll see that in our right side view. In order to draw this accurately, I need to know these two distances. And then starting with the line command, I'm going to hover over this endpoint and track over the 1.9 distance. I'll go back to that same endpoint and now track up 0.3. Just need to put that on the right layer, switch that back to object, and make that layer current. Now with the mirror command, I can make copies of this edge as well as these edges to the top of that view. The mirror command is MI, select those two edges. I need a point exactly in between where my originals are and where I want them to go, so I'm looking for a midpoint. Track straight across and I can see a preview based on where I'm tracking for where those lines will go. When I see them in the position that I want, I'll click. Pay attention to the mirror command. In this command, you have the option to erase the source or the original objects. The default is no, but occasionally you may want to erase those, so pay attention to this option as the last part of this command. I'm going to press enter for no, and I have those in place. Now with the trim command and the fence option, I'm going to drag lines through the areas I want trimmed. I'm also going to trim one more time and eliminate this edge. The next thing I need to create in that top view is this notch. I see that this has a regular radius with the radius symbol, but the radius itself is missing. The information about the shape actually comes from this linear dimension, which isn't the radius, of course, but actually the diameter. I also know the position of the center of this feature from this linear dimension. So we'll start by creating a circle and tracking the center point of that in 1.12, going to the diameter option and entering 0.78 as the diameter. With my quadrant OSNAP running, I can now track edges from that point to the edge, both top and bottom, trim, enter past the cutting edges, select the areas I want to trim with a crossing window, and finished. Now, the edges that are here may look like they're the same width as the edges of my slot. They're not. These come from a different position entirely. The top surface of that right side view, where the resulting line segment is determined by this linear dimension in this angle. Don't assume that you can just track lines across. This is not correct. In this position, we'll need to use the miter line to fill that information in. We don't have this done yet in our right side view, so we'll wait until that's finished to enter those edges. We move over to the right side view now. We'll go ahead and create those edges. Starting with the line command, I'll track down 0.44. I need to change my angle increment now to 30. And wherever I intersect that top edge is where that lands. Use the mirror command to make a copy of that edge on the other side. Trim, fence, draw through those edges that I want to trim, and my right side is coming into place. I'll also trim away portions of the front view as I'm seeing them. Okay, I'm going to use the miter line to fill in information from the top view down to the right. If I start my line and I track from this edge, click where I see that intersection point and track straight down. This allows me to fill in this edge here very accurately by projecting through that miter line. You'll notice though I have an extra line segment. I don't really need to do that if I know how to use the OSNAP override called temporary track. Start the line command TT for temporary track. This will allow me to hover and track over to the miter line and click where I intersect, and then track down. The next point that I click will start my line segment, and then I can click to finish. I have a pair of hidden lines in my right side view that represent the notches cut out of the back. So I'll change my layer to hidden, start my line command and temporary track from that endpoint to the miter line, being very careful that I'm looking for that intersection and not any other OSNAP. Click and click. Now, this right side view is also symmetrical, just like the top view is. So by creating the set on the left-hand side, I can use the mirror command to fill it in on the right instead of having to recreate all the lines. MI for mirror, select those edges, look for a midpoint OSNAP, track down, and enter. I'm going to switch back to my object layer now. I've got some edges to fill in on my front view. The first one coming from where these two edges meet. The others come from information on the right side view. The edge reflecting the top of this notch comes from the top of the endpoint. So I need to be very careful that I'm tracking not from the midpoint of this angled line, but from the endpoint of the hidden line. In this case, just to be on the safe side, I'm going to click and start my line there. Click again when I hit the intersection points and erase that extra segment and trim away the extra. I've got one more object edge in the front view, and that comes from the intersection of these two surfaces. So I'll track over, click, click, and the object lines are all set. The last two in the top view that I need to enter come from these two intersection points. So I'll start my line command, temporary track, hover up to the miter line and click across. With this one, I'm going to draw it out with an extra line segment So you can see what I mean. It's very easy to assume that these lines have the same width. They don't. They're different features with different dimensions. Switch back to my hidden layer now. I'm going to track the hidden edge down from that notch. And the last things I need to enter are on the center layer. Check my dim sun value. That's all set. Place a center mark on this arc. I'm going to copy the vertical lines into this position. Using the midpoint here and lining it up with the midpoint of my hidden edge. I'm going to take these extension lines now, and using the grips I'll stretch them out. These will become part of my symmetry line. I've got one more center line to draw through my right side view. I'm going to do that with the line command on the center layer. This line is long enough to show that pattern, so drawing a line here works just fine. This one's a little too short to show the pattern, so as you saw before, I copied from the center mark. Now, I'm getting ready to create those thick double lines at the end of either edge of my center line. We take a look at what those lines look like. Make your best guess and make them look like the handout. I would say these are about 1/4 of an inch long, and notice they're much thicker than the center line is. I'm going to create those using the P-line command. So again, they're about 1/4 of an inch long. The P-line command needs to know where you want to start that line. Because they're centered on this line, I'm going to go up half of that, 0.125. Then I have the option to change the width. You can see from my earlier drawing that I had set a width of 0.04. I'm going to change that slightly so you'll see what happens. Notice too, this is the starting width. The next step in this command is the ending width, which it will fill in, but you can choose to change it to get a line of a different starting and ending width. These want to be the same, so I'll press enter. And the next point I need to choose is the actual length of the line, 0.25. I think that's a little thick, but it will just give you an idea as to what it looks like. I'm moving this in slightly to show the tail end of that horizontal center line. I'm going to copy this now, just far enough away so that I can see there are two lines, but that they look like they belong together as a pair. I need to get a copy at the other end. I'm going to mirror these and use the M2P, midway between 2 points override, to get it exactly in between. So my mirrored copy is placed just like my original. I also need a pair of symmetry lines on the right side view, so I'm going to start by copying a pair and locating them from endpoint to endpoint. I'm going to rotate these into position now around that endpoint, using my tracking to swing around, and then I'll mirror a copy to the other side. I'm going to move those all down just a little bit, and I have my 3 views drawn.